rise up, whoa, not gonna give up, whoa, we're gonna rise up, whoa, we're gonna rise up, whoa, not gonna give up, whoa, we're gonna rise up, yeah, oh, we're gonna rise up.
Welcome to Rise Up, hosted by me, Steve Collin. I'm so glad you're here today, and I really value that you're, spending the time to hang out with me, and hopefully this podcast is really kind of giving you a couple of nuggets or making your day just that tiny bit brighter and better. And I'm so excited because today I'm going to be interviewing Bill Ohanlon, and he is not only a good friend and a great guy, and we have so many laughs, but he is super knowledgeable. He's written over 40 books. He actually wrote his last 41 books, so he just finished that a couple of weekends ago. And so he's had over 87 songs cut by artists and different people. He's written 305 songs just this year with his collaboration team and his sync team. He is super, super successful. He's a psychotherapist, and he also has, that's what his major is. And he's, one of the coolest things that you're going to hear is that he is actually, he's focused a lot of his lot of his career on solution based therapy, and not just focusing on the problems and the issues. But he's really, it's even just in knowing that, just as I say that, that he wants to help people and he wants to make this world a better and brighter place. And he drops so many gold nuggets and gems in this interview. It's you might have to come back and watch it a couple of times or listen to it a few times. He is absolutely amazing. So anyway, before we dive in, I just want to let you guys know that, if you want to sponsor this, if you want me to keep continuing doing this, please become a partner over at patreon.com/Steve Collin, and you can become a partner there. And also head over to the Facebook podcast groups, where we actually talk about a lot of this stuff in this group. We talk about the segment or the interviews and little lessons and little takeaways. And I'd like to get to know you there. And so, it's, you guys are getting to know me and my guests, but I want to get to know you more. And so head over there. It's Rise Up with Steve Collin, and it's a Facebook group. So it's a private group, so you'll have to ask for permission to join, but it's a very safe area there, safe zone, where we get to hang out and do this more in depth, more just on a different level, just another layer or another level in. And also, if this has been helpful at all, please consider writing a review and giving us a 5-star review, and hopefully that will, I know that with the more reviews, then the higher it goes up on the search engines and the list, so that people actually can find it a lot easier, and we can shine this light. You by doing that will help shine a little bit of light. And these podcasts are all about being positive and helping people and sharing motivational and inspirational stories, and there's so many people that need this. I know that. And so anyway, enough of that. We are going to be diving in, and this is an amazing he shares a little bit on his story and some amazing takeaway things. So I don't want to spoil anything or share too much. So let's go ahead and dive in. Awesome. I'm so excited. We got Bill here. Bill's a great friend, and Bill Ohanlon, and we've written some songs together, so we're collaborators. But Bill is a leader in the entrepreneurial industry, really is, because you've done so many great things. You've reached the dreams of so many people, and thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me. We do have a lot in common. We both have kind of a nice positive energy and a can-do attitude. And we both done a bunch of entrepreneurial things, including music. And And I was touched by hearing about your family situation with the stillbirth. And I have something to say about that that's relevant to other people as well as you. You know, I was a therapist for many, many years. I'm a full-time songwriter now, but I still have my hand in the therapy world. And I had some traumas in my life, and I developed, having seen so many people who are traumatized. Most people who come to therapy have some history of trauma. I developed a curiosity. Why does trauma mess some people up for life? I mean, they just never, they're diminished by it, they're wounded by it, they're scarred by it. And everybody's touched by trauma, and in a negative way. But some people go on and thrive after trauma, and some people don't. And you doing this podcast, I just, before we get too much into it, you've discovered one of the principles that I learned over my 40-some years of being a therapist and dealing with my own trauma and seeing my friends and family go through theirs, and the difference between post-traumatic success and post-traumatic stress. And one of them is, can you take this pain and this wound and turn it into a contribution to other people in the world? Wow. It's one of the things that can flip it from torturing and haunting to healing and making a positive difference in the world. And I think there are 3 elements to turning trauma into post-traumatic success, but that is one of them. So when you talked about the impetus for this podcast, and it's gone beyond that, I know, but I just want to acknowledge that up front, that this very thing that we're doing together is not only hopefully healing for you, but healing for the world. And then that comes back around to you and your family.
Gosh, wow, mic drop already. I think we're done. So that's gosh, I really appreciate that, Bill. And yeah, it's I guess when it happened for me and my wife at the beginning of this year, I after kind of being in a dark, deep hole for a few weeks, maybe in a month, I realized that I didn't want to be worse through this. I wanted to be better through this. I wanted to pick myself up somehow and pick up the pieces and just be better through this, not worse. And I didn't have much details, but that was the main thing that that's all I could hang on to. But gosh, thanks so much for saying
yeah,
that.
I think, that you intuitively knew something, and it is part of your character. I think you are the kind of, what can I do with this? How can I make it useful for other people as well? And that's one of your impulses, I think. But, I've written a bunch of books. I think we talked about that, or we will talk about that. But one of them is called Quick Steps to Resolving Trauma. A nice little kitty cat on the cover there, nice friendly kitty cat looking at a mouse. And in there, I talk about these 3 elements. So why don't we just start with that? You've had trauma, I've had trauma. Most people who are listening to this or watching this have had some sort of trauma in their life. And, for years, we didn't really acknowledge trauma. We didn't know what kind of major effect. And now I think most people are aware of it. And I think sometimes we've gone a little far over to the side of, once you're traumatized, you'll never get over it. And I think, having been a therapist and having gone through mine and seen other people go through theirs, I was really curious, what makes the difference? And there are 3 elements. One of the things that happens with trauma is we go through a disconnection. We disconnect from our feelings, sometimes from our bodies, from other people. The analogy I use is sometimes, let's imagine, it's terrible for animal lovers, but the analogy I think is really helpful. Let's imagine a dog gets hit on the highway by a car, not killed, just hit. And somebody, either that person or somebody else, pulls over. The dog's in the ditch, just lying there. And you think, okay, is the dog okay? Is the dog dead? And somebody comes up to it and the dog starts moving. And you think, okay, the dog's alive. And as you go to approach that dog, what happens? The dog either shrinks away as you try to touch him to see if he's okay or wounded or needs to go to the vet or whatever, or he growls and bites out at you. Because when we're traumatized, we pull back or push back socially, from some feelings and memories and experiences inside. It's a natural thing. It's a protective thing. I don't want to be hurt again. And so that natural disconnection we have from ourselves and some of our aspects of ourselves, feelings and body and senses and perceptions and memories, sensations, and from other people, from social things. You want to pull back. You probably weren't going out partying or playing a lot of gigs during that time after your trauma. And sometimes from bigger meaning. It's like, why did God do this to me? Why did they let this happen? So sometimes we lose that. It shatters our sense of meaning and what does it all mean? And I thought the world made sense, but this doesn't make any sense. And why does this happen? So we disconnect in those three areas, and reconnecting in any of those areas can really make a difference. So the difference between post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic success is in the wake of trauma, after your initial terrible, like you say, month or however long, it's different for everybody. You've disconnected, and then you start to reconnect or connect in a new way, maybe even in a stronger way, to your spirituality, to other people, to your wife, maybe, to friends, to your body, to your emotions. You really kind of never dealt with grief very well, and now you're connected to your body and your feelings. So that's the first one. If you can reconnect or connect stronger or whatever in the wake of trauma, you're likely to turn it to the side of post-traumatic success rather than post-traumatic stress. And then the second one is, do you get harsh with yourself or other people? Like, we all know people who've been through trauma, and then they turn kind of outwards and angry. They turn bigoted or hateful, or they blame other people for things, or they blame themselves. Oh, you're such a loser. Why did you mess up like this? What's wrong with you? You get self-critical. And so in the wake of trauma, there's a little of that. What could I have done? Well, I did this wrong, or, what's wrong with me, or how come I'm cursed, or whatever. There's a bit of that. But once you get through that, again, whatever period that is for you, can you turn towards compassion? So self-compassion or compassion towards other people, which is, again, where we started. Your impulse was, I wonder if I could help other people who are going through difficult things, to help them heal and to inspire them to go, to be more successful and to do things they want to do in their lives. So you may notice there's a trend here. I have this 3 C's of post-traumatic success: connection, compassion, and the third one is contribution, which is what we started with. Can you take the hurt, the pain, the trauma, the wound of this and say, can I go out and help other people who are hurting or who might experience this or something like this, to heal or to find some meaning or purpose? And that gives you meaning and purpose, which starts to reconnect you to that bigger sense of meaning. And so those 3 elements I discovered in my clients in psychotherapy and people that I knew in my own life. And I read a bunch of biographies or memoirs or autobiographies, and I could find those threads running through it. You can make a difference and turn your trauma or terrible events into meaningful, helpful things, post-traumatic success instead of post-traumatic stress. And I wrote a book about this called Thriving Through Crisis. And I think that, I've never written a whole book just with those 3 elements, but when I saw what you were doing with this podcast, it reminded me of that kind of informal study I've done of what makes a difference in people's lives in the wake of trauma.
Wow, gosh, that's absolutely amazing. For anybody who's listening right now, I think you need to go back and rewind that and go through that again, because Bill dropped so many great gems there, and it's just so powerful that that you've shared those in books. And I didn't even get to tell everybody that you've just finished your 41st book.
My first book. I want credit for every one of those, Steve.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and they're all up on Amazon, or where can people like?
Yeah, the 41st one isn't out yet, but it will be. And some of them are out of print, but you can usually find an old copy on. I occasionally have to go on because I'm like, oh, I don't even have a copy of that book. So yeah, they're all on Amazon, I would think.
Yeah.
If you look.
On that, and that's just amazing, that you've just had so much background in many different areas, and then you have got such a great way to share it, and obviously a book is you can just go nonstop until your time, until you're the end of the day or whatever, until you're hungry, and that is just absolutely so powerful, and so we have many viewers and listeners here that their dream is to I was going to say their dream is to buy a book. Well, guess what? You can fulfill that right now. So
There you go.
write a book or write even just something, but they just don't know where to start, and there's just so much of that fear. Tell us a little bit about going back to.
Actually, for those who are actually watching, I want to just turn my screensaver on here on Zoom. And it's a picture of me with my chin on a bunch of books, if you're just listening and you're not seeing the visual. And I have a little card with the same picture, and I give that out occasionally. And I was in Nashville where I write songs and I do a lot of co-writing and playing. And I gave that card to somebody. He said, wow, is this how many books you've read? And I said, no, that's how many books I've written. And he said, oh, wow, I've only read one book in my life. It was in high school. I never read another book. I go, well, I read a lot. I mean, that's one of my escapes from the world. I read a couple of books a week. And, but yeah, I never imagined that I would write books. I loved reading. I was a big reader, partly because I was really shy and introverted, both. I was two things. And they went together for me as a kid. Big family, 8 kids, big Irish Catholic family, very loud. And I would just withdraw. I would sit under the table and read books when there was a big family gathering. And but I just wasn't much of a writer. And I'll tell you something that got me going. I was studying to be a psychotherapist. Talk about traumas. Two things I think, now that I have some perspective and I look back on my younger years. I was molested by a relative when I was a kid. And he sort of confused me into it, is all I can say. I don't want to get into the whole story. It's too long. Actually, I don't mind telling it, but it's a bit long. And he confused me. He turned off the television and he started talking in a really confusing way and sort of manipulated me into that molestation situation that way. And so that was one of the precursors to becoming a writer later. I did not know that. But then when I went to university, I, again, came from this big family and I was a shy kid, but in my family, I was okay. I was with my siblings and, we'd get along just really well. And I could talk, I wasn't that shy in my family, but when I meet new people or when we were in a social gathering, I just wouldn't talk. I had a cousin who came to see me give one of my talks many years later and said, I can't believe you do public speaking for a living. I never heard you talk till you were 18. I never even heard your voice. And so I was really that shy kid. I went to university and I got depressed. First time I was way far away from my family. I was unprepared for adult life. I didn't handle money well. I didn't eat well. I was really into music and books. So I would take my small pittance of the money that I'd saved, and I was supposed to spend only $40 a week, and I would spend $38 on books and music the first day, and then I would starve the rest of the time, and my friends would take pity and give me a little food sometimes. But I was just, and I became really isolated because I was so shy. I didn't do well in that setting. It was a big university, and I sort of got lost. It was a hippie time, it was a lot of questioning of all reality and the establishment. And I just lost all sense of meaning. And I took to my bed, and I didn't realize what depression was at the time, but I got seriously depressed, almost did myself in. I had a couple of close friends who were about as weird and alienated as I was as hippie at the time. I've gone back to my hippie days. If you're on the video, you can see I have long hair again. I had short hair for about 40 years, but I've grown it again during the pandemic and just didn't cut it. But I went to my couple of 2 or 3 friends because I thought, if I kill myself, they're going to be really, shocked. I better prepare them. So I went and talked to my first couple of friends, and they were about as unhappy and depressed and alienated as I was. And their response was, I understand, I'm in pain all the time too, emotional pain, psychological pain, and mental pain. And I just don't have the courage to kill myself. I admire your courage was basically their message. And the third one was more normal. And she was like, what? Kill you? Why? No, you can't kill you. And the other two were so accepting. I wasn't really prepared to defend my decision, but she was like, why? And I said, well, I just feel I'm not for this world. I just feel like I have no skin on. Everything affects me. I'm all nerves and I can't be around people. I'm too shy. I can't say what I want to say. I'm lonely. I'm unhappy. I've lost all sense of why do I get out of bed in the morning? And here we are at university, and it's sort of a protected environment for a few years. But pretty soon I'm going to have to go out and work. I can't even get out of bed. I can't get out of bed till noon. And then I go back to sleep in a couple of hours. I just don't have the energy. I don't want to work for an American corporation. They seem evil to me. I just don't see the point. And it's bad now, but it's going to be worse in a few years. And, all I want to do is like write songs and write poetry and, not be around people. And she said, okay, how about this? She said, I have 3 aunts. They've never married. They all own farmland in the center of the country, Nebraska, which is where my folks were from, this agricultural place. And when they die, I'm going to inherit everything. And they own land. They've invested in farmland. There's always an empty farmhouse. You can live on one of those farmhouses, grow your own food, which in my delusional hippie state, I thought I could do at that time. And I was reading Mother Earth News. Sure, I could go back to the land. And I tried it a few years later, and it's really hard to grow your own food. You can't grow pizza either, I discovered.
And a lot of hard work. It's not
it takes years to get a pizza together. But so all the ingredients really hard. Yeah. And so in any case, she said, look, you could just be there, write poetry. You don't have to be around people. You don't have to earn a living. Just promise me you won't kill yourself. And I'll promise you when one of those aunts dies and leaves me their inheritance, I will let you live there. So I said, that's a possibility. And then I said, well, how old are your aunts? And she said, they're in their 60s. And I thought, well, they're almost dead. And there's 3 of them. The likelihood of one of them kicking off is, so I agreed. And then I had this challenge of how do I live until one of those aunts kicks off? Because I was miserable and I became interested in psychology. Like, why did I get so miserable? And how do people get less miserable? And that turned out to be psychotherapy. So psychology was just kind of analyzing everything and figuring out what it was about. Psychotherapy was helping people have less suffering. And I thought, oh, I could do that. I could do that for a living even, because I could help other people that were like me, miserable, wanting to kill themselves, depressed, anxious, whatever it may be. That's a pretty good profession. That's not like working for a corporation. And I became a therapist and I became obsessed. I read everything. I'm a big reader, as I said. I read everything I could about psychotherapy. But when I got to my graduate training in psychotherapy, I became really dissatisfied. I by then met this eccentric psychiatrist in the area in which I was going to university, Phoenix area, Arizona. And he was a guy who defied norms and traditions of psychotherapy. And he focused on people's strengths, their abilities, and their resources instead of their diagnoses and what was wrong with them. And that was a revolution for me. And I, shy as I was, I started arguing with my professors about how the focus they had was all on what was wrong with people. And they didn't have the balance of, but people have resilience and strengths and abilities to survive the most difficult things. I mean, you look at the refugees that are, they've survived the most amazing, weirdest, terrible experiences. Holocaust survivors have survived and sometimes thrived. It's like, you're not taking that into account. You're only looking at how people are messed up. So I started to argue with him. And then when I got out of graduate school, I started to teach workshops on this guy's work and some variations on it. And I started to call my work solution oriented.
Gosh, Bill, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time and your your passion and the wisdom that you've shared. You're all about helping this world. You're all about sharing and giving. You're all about pouring out to others, and it definitely shows in this interview. And you thank you so much. You've just dropped so many things, and I encourage all the listeners right now, jot down or on your phone, or take a little note, write down a few of those little things, because one thing that happens when you listen to something, it kind of goes in. It's like a sponge. It kind of has to soak in, but when you actually go ahead and write it, you end up reading it, which is the second way you're going to learn. And then you end up maybe saying it out loud. And when you write it, so you're actually learning and you're sinking it in deeper, and it becomes more of you. Even if you never go back to those notes, or if you maybe only see those notes one other time, you're still going through that process. And that's at least 3 times you're diving in deeper and cementing it into your life. And so absolutely try that. And I'm so thankful again that you're hanging out with us. And please, if you want to become a partner, head over to my Patreon account, which is patreon.com/Steve Collum. And consider being a partner, consider being a sponsor of a show. And also any 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. Any of those reviews would be awesome. And I also head over to the Facebook group, which is Rise Up with Steve Collum. And I will see you there. Thanks again. I'll see you there.
Whoa, we're gonna rise up. Whoa, not gonna give up. Whoa, we're gonna rise up. Whoa, we're gonna rise up. Whoa, not gonna give up. Whoa, we're gonna rise up. Rise up, yeah.